Members, good afternoon. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting. Agenda item number 1. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There is one paper, CB 253/2025-01. It is a referral memorandum from the panel on Home Affairs, Culture and Sports regarding Ms. Maggie CHAN's suggestion of a discussion topic, commemorative activities of the 80th anniversary of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. I have put this discussion item together with the promotion of the Constitution and the Basic Law and taking forward the work on patriotic education on the list of outstanding items for discussion. Agenda item number 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. The list of outstanding items for discussion and the list of follow-up actions have been sent to members. The next meeting will be held on the 17th of March 2025, Monday, from 2:30 p.m. There will be 2 discussion items. The promotion of the Constitution and the Basic Law, as well as another item on election. Dr. Chi-Yun, well, the next meeting is scheduled for mid-March, and the general election is going to be held soon. Is it suitable to discuss this agenda item only in March? Should the administration discuss with the Legislative Council as early as possible the voter registration campaign or the general election of LegCo? The administration is fully aware of members' concerns. It understands members' concerns in relation to 2025 Election Committee subsector by-election and 2025 Legislative Council general election. They will follow up on it. If members have no objection, we will discuss these 2 items. Agenda item number 3. Report on the work of the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data Hong Kong in 2024. The paper has been sent to members. Let us first invite the administration to join us. Members who would like to speak, please press the button to request to speak. As I understand, Ms. Ada Chung, Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data, will walk us through the paper using a PowerPoint presentation. Commissioner, the floor is yours. Commissioner, please. Chairman, members, good afternoon. I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation. Overall, the PCPD in 2024 continue to monitor the implementation of the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. In 2021, the ordinance was amended, and we have strengthened the work in relation to tackling anti-doxing cases. We have been decisively implementing the ordinance. The situation is largely in check. There were doxing cases, complaints, and there were also investigations carried out by the PCPD. There's a downward trend, as we have observed. Internet developments have posed a challenge to the protection of privacy. The PCPD is taking a multi-pronged approach to guard against different breaches. We have been strengthening public education, and we are also studying to amend the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance (PDPO) in order to curb the situation. The office is strengthening the work on data security as well, including setting up a web page in relation to data security as well as a hotline. There is also a tool for organizations to make a self-assessment, that is the data security scanner. There is also data security package for SMEs. Free training quotas will be provided to participating organizations to strengthen their data security protection. Seminars and conferences are also held to provide internal training. We also work with the Digital Policy Office, the Hong Kong Police Force, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. We aim at promoting data security. Using data security as the theme, we organized flagship event Privacy Awareness Week, and we have a data security mascot. We aim to heighten public awareness on data security. On a different note, the office collaborates with other departments to promote digital economy, which is in line with national strategies. In 2024, we issued Artificial Intelligence Model Personal Data Protection Framework. We provide practical guidelines. We also published different guidelines and articles. We compare notes with different organizations and promote AI governance and AI security. On tackling doxing cases, the office handled a total of 442 cases in 2024. They include proactive investigation as well as complaints in relation to doxing complaints, which is a remarkable drop of 42% from 756 in 2023. For online doxing cases, the figure decreased from 231 in 2023 to 87 in 2024. We can see that the situation is largely under control. We have started criminal investigations targeting 118 cases and arrested a total of 20 people. Some breaches were in relation to Section 64(3)(c) of the PDPO. These are serious cases. The office issued a total of 194 cessation notices to 20 online platforms. We requested removing over 5,300 doxing messages. We have also removed 58 channels which are aimed at doxing on the internet. The compliance rate is over 96% overall. The amendment to the PDPO took effect in October 2021. We have handled a total of 3,326 doxing cases. We have initiated prosecution investigation against 372 cases. We have issued 2,072 cessation notices to 53 online platforms. We requested removing a total of 33,600 doxing messages. The compliance rate is over 96%. Apart from removing individual doxing messages, we successfully removed 250 doxing channels in 2024. We found a total of 87 cases in relation to doxing online. Which saw a massive drop of 90% from 1,134 to 87. we received 335 complaints against doxing, which is a drop of 40% from last year. We arrested a total of 63 people, including 3 joint operations with the police. We have referred 103 doxing cases to the police force for further investigation. In relation to other law enforcement work, in 2024, we received a total of 3,431 cases, which is a slight decrease from 3,582 complaints. The drop was 4.2%. There were blind advertisements to collect the personal data of job seekers. So we conducted investigation against JobsDB and other 8 organizations. We published a report. In 2024, we received 203 personal data leakage cases, which represented an increase of about 30%. We issued investigation reports. 5 involved hackers. 1 involved the failure to delete relevant information. We have already issued a notification or a notice to prevent similar events from happening again. In November 2024, we published a report on privacy protection in the digital age, a study of the collection of personal data by 10 online travel platforms, reviewing 10 online travel platforms commonly used by citizens. We aim to understand how these platforms collect and use the personal data of their users. Based on the findings, we have provided recommendations to the operators of online travel platforms on the best practices and enhancement of privacy protection. In 2024, we received 18,125 public inquiries. On average, there were 50 cases. This represented an increase of 14% from 15,914 cases last year. In 2024, we received 1,158 inquiries in relation to using personal data for fraud, an increase of 46% from 793 cases in 2023. On protecting security, on data security, the office has been working with different organizations to enhance data security. We have devised data security tools. There is a thematic web page, data security scanner, and data security hotline. We published the relevant guidelines on data security. The office will continue to strengthen collaboration with the trade. For example, we will hold training seminars and launch data security packages. We also held Data Security Week or Privacy Awareness Week 2024. We have launched a mascot data guardian, and we also published articles in both Chinese and English newspapers, online media platforms, and professional journals to explain the importance of data security. We adopt different publicity measures to promote the best practices in relation to using AI. Last June, we published a framework that is a model framework to help organizations to use new generative AI and to help with their compliance with the PDPO. We hope to help organizations to protect privacy while using AI. The office holds international conferences, seminars, and talks and conducts compliance checks. We promote the safety of AI. On promoting messages in relation to protecting personal privacy, last year, we organized activities. The Student Ambassador for Privacy Protection Program, Partnering Schools Recognition Scheme 2024. 67 secondary schools have become partnering schools. We disseminate anti-doxing messages by organizing educational talks, broadcasting educational videos, and distributing promotional materials. We hold roving talks and we promote the anti-doxing messages to over 8,100 students. To heighten public awareness, we have set up a dedicated hotline. We provide a one-stop platform to help the public to guard against fraud. There is a publicity event, Don't Hand Over Your Personal Data, Beware of Fraudsters. On different social media platforms, we promote messages in relation to fraud prevention. At Mid-Autumn Festival and Christmas, I visited the community, visited the elderly, and share messages on fraud prevention. We gave the elderly tips. In 2025, despite a downward trend on doxing cases online, we'll continue to make decisive law enforcement actions. Apart from regular cyber patrols, we'll continue to strengthen internal training on evidence collection. Our aim is to conduct criminal investigation in a one-stop manner. Meanwhile, we'll continue to heighten public awareness by way of publicity measures in order to combat doxing acts. We'll continue to hold roving talks at schools. We aim to promote anti-doxing messages and cyberbullying to secondary school students. One of our highlights next year is to strengthen the work on data security. We will continue to promote data security awareness by holding different events. We hold seminars for SMEs in order to promote public awareness on privacy protection and data security. We will continue to mount publicity events in this regard. On TV, in the lift lobby of residential buildings, we play video clips. We also put in place posters at bus stops. We visit the elderly and share anti-fraud messages with the elderly. We hold fraud prevention seminars for university students as well.
In order to answer the challenges brought by new technologies such as AI, we are going to release further revision to our guidelines concerning AI, and also we are going to add a new award for AI management under privacy protection campaign. And also, in order to tie in with international advances over protection of personal data, and also to answer latest challenges, we are now very closely reviewing the operation of the PDPO, and we will continue to look at relevant legislation from other jurisdictions, and also to take into consideration the situation on the ground in Hong Kong, and to come up with law amendment proposals that are timely and also that are suitable for Hong Kong circumstances. And we are not going to spare any efforts in enforcing the legislation, and also to fulfill our roles as promoters of personal data privacy protection, and also to inculcate culture of personal data privacy protection in Hong Kong. We've got 9 members that have indicated that they wanted to speak. I'm going to read out their names in order. First of all, Mr. So Chang Wing, Mr. Kingsley Wong, and then Vice Chairman Mr. Chen Yong and Mr. Teck Chi Yun, Mr. Tang Fei, Madam Carmen Khan, and the 7th one is Mr. Yim Kong, and then Madam Doreen Kong, followed by Mr. Kenneth Fogg. We have till 3:30 to discuss this item, and if you have not pressed your buttons, you have to do so as soon as possible, because we really must finish today's meeting at 4:30 today, and that's why we have to do a good job with timekeeping. And each member will be allocated 4 minutes, answer and question included. Mr. So, looking at your report, I get the feeling that the office actually has covered a lot of grounds during the last year, and it seems that your performance has been effective. I'd like to ask something that is really fashionable. Looking at your paper, it gives me the impression that in 2024 you have released the privacy protection data model under the AI umbrella. And in the second half of the year, you are going to issue relevant guidelines. AI is really progressing very rapidly. And deepfake, as well as artificial intelligence, have become tools for fraudsters to defraud people. So concerning the latest AI-assisted fraud devices and fraud measures, I'd like to know whether you have really updated your guidelines accordingly in order to deal with these latest challenges. And also, the application of AI and the advent of AI really is evolving every day. And even if you release the guidelines at the first of the year, it doesn't mean that you can rest on your laurel. And so, have you been keeping yourself abreast of the latest events to update your guidelines correspondingly, so as to ensure that institutions as well as the corporate sector can meet the latest conditions that are pertinent to latest challenges from AI? Thank you for the question. Indeed, the advent of AI has caused us to have to face new challenges, because AI really is a sword that cuts both ways. Even though it has almost limitless potential, it can help corporations and individuals to operate more effectively, and also can bring revolutionary changes to our lifestyle. At the same time, it also poses significant challenges concerning protection of personal data. And that is why we have been keeping a very close watch over the application of AI in Hong Kong. And Mr. So mentioned that AI is now being used for fraud. Indeed, it has come to our attention. And as far as my office is concerned, in 2021, we have already released moral guidelines over the development and the use of AI. And that guideline really it's up to par with international standards and international principles. However, as time goes by, in 2024, i.e. last year, we further released AI personal data protection model. And as Mr. So has pointed out, AI really is progressing in leaps and bounds. And that is why we really need to continue to update our relevant guidelines. And that's why in 2021 as well as 2024, respectively, we have released 2 sets of guidelines. And in the latest version, we have educated corporations to, on a step-by-step basis, how to deal with challenges and risks generated by the application and use of AI. For instance, we have recommended AI to introduce AI management policies and principles, and also to set up risk assessment mechanism. And all of these have been enshrined in our guidelines. And for this year, as I have already mentioned just now, it is our plan to, within the first half of this year, release a further set of guidelines. As for whether our guidelines will cover measures to stop using AI or to deal with AI being used for fraud. Now, if we're talking about generated AI, then the users will have to pay attention to whether the generated AI content really is lawful. And we also recommend that the producers of generated AI content should put watermarks onto their products to make people know that that AI product will not be used for fraud. Mr. Kingsley Wong, I'd like to talk about protection of personal data of job seekers because when you fill out job applications, you sometimes have to fill in very sensitive information, for instance, your work credentials and also your academic credentials and so on and so forth, and your name and ID. And it has been mentioned in the paper that 8 parties have breached the PDPO in their attempt to recruit job seekers. And indeed, some of these organizations actually have supplied fake telephone numbers and also fake addresses. And so job seekers really could be in danger. And they are concerned whether the sensitive information that is supplied would actually be used by these fraudsters organizations and be resold to a third party. Now, say for these organizations that are supplying fake addresses and fake emails and fake telephone numbers, then is there really a danger that these organizations are collecting sensitive personal information for illegal use? And if you only issued warning letter or advice letter, wouldn't it be too lenient? Shouldn't you be handing such cases over to police for enforcement action to investigate into whether these people are actually using people's sensitive information for legal use and for their own profit? And actually, a lot of the Dawson cases, 159 of them actually, have to do with conflicts at job places. I'd like to know whether you have any concrete cases that you can supply for public education so that corporations know exactly what to watch out for. So that employees as well as employers can really be on high alert concerning doxing offenses that came out of job conflicts. Indeed, concerning blind advertisements, our office is really very much concerned about this issue, and that's why last year we have spent around 3 to 4 months examining over 20,000 job advertisements. And it has come to our attention that a small minority of them, around 20 odd, have to do with blind advertisement. And we are worried that unruly members of our society might have made use of the blind advertisements to collect information illegally. Fortunately, after examining the 20-odd questionable cases, we have not found any case that involve illegal transfer or illegal sale of personal information. Be that as it may, some of these cases warrant further investigation. And that is why for one job-seeking platform and one job-seeking organization, we have already set up formal investigation. And the conclusion is that they have indeed contravened personal data privacy protection ordinance. Indeed, as has been pointed out by a member, some of these organizations have failed to supply real telephone number, real addresses, real email, and they only require job seekers to supply personal information. And that's why we have ruled that they have breached the PDPO. We have already explained to these relevant parties as to the requirements of the law. Under the present legislation, after investigation, if indeed it is found that a certain party is in breach of the PDPO, we have to issue enforcement notice. And that's exactly what we did with these cases. But some of the other cases have been found to be contravening the law inadvertently, and that's why we only issue advice letters against them. And we do not have any powers to prosecute them or to impose any fines. As for job places conflicts and relevant doxing cases, job conflicts usually happened between employer and employees or among colleagues. And maybe it's about an appraisal report, or maybe it's a dismissal, and the aggrieved party therefore resort to doxing in order to expose the employers and also to expose their colleagues. And so those are the cases.
Next member, Mr. Brave Chan, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions. In paragraph 13, it was mentioned there are blind advertisements on JobsDB. When you issued enforcement notices, some organizations received advisory letters, whereas some received enforcement notices. What is the difference between these two? Next, 442 doxing cases, 118 criminal investigation. Do you have any follow-up on these events or these cases? Over 96% of the channels removed doxing messages. What about the remainder? Are they local platforms or overseas platforms? Do you refer these cases to any law enforcement agencies for further follow-up? How are you going to deal with it? We saw a marked drop of doxing cases. There are 10 doxing cases in relation to political leanings. Regarding cases in relation to political leanings, has the situation become more serious or less serious? Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair, for your questions. For your first question, for online platforms, some received enforcement notices, whereas some received advisory letters. It depends on the gravity of the situation. If we believe that the organization has the intent to breach the PDPO, or when an organization takes out blind ads to collect personal data, it is clearly in breach of the PDPO. However, some organizations provide contact details of their own organizations to the online platform, but then the online platform doesn't list the contact details of these organizations. We consider these explanations reasonable. We then send advisory letters to these organizations to tell them clearly about the law. In 2024, we handle a total of 442 doxing cases, including online cyber patrol cases, as well as complaints against doxing. After reviewing these cases, we need to take into account evidence. Is there any mens rea in relation to criminal cases? If so, we will initiate criminal investigation and prosecution. If, however, there is only bullying cases, then we will not pursue the criminal path. Regarding online platforms, most of the platforms receiving the cessation notices are online platforms. However, I'm glad to report that the compliance rate is as high as 96%. For non-compliant cases, we have to follow up on these cases. For example, we have to issue warning letters or even multiple warning letters. These platforms are overseas platforms. For those in Hong Kong, all of them removed doxing messages. If need be, we refer these cases to the police force for follow-up. We also work with overseas counterparts and follow up with them. Regarding doxing cases because of different political leanings, I'm glad to report to members, since the new doxing ordinance took effect, since 2021, doxing cases as a result of different political leanings have seen a marked drop. In 2024, we only saw 10 such cases. Some of these cases involved law enforcement officials. Some involved political figures. As we can see, some doxing messages stem from the messages a few years ago. They resurfaced online. They aren't new doxing messages. As soon as we saw such messages, we removed them instantly. Next, Dr. Tik Ji-yun. Thank you, Chairman. I'm concerned about personal data leakage. In the past few months, there were a few such cases involving multiple departments, say EMSD, Companies Registry, and the FSD. Data are stored on third-party cloud platforms. For instance, there is no regular clearing of personal data. There is also a lack of interdepartmental supervision. There's a lack of transparency as well. As I understand, the person in charge of an organization left the organization in which data breaches were seen, but then that person was appointed by the government as a high-ranking official. I hope that the PCPD will protect the personal data of members of the public. Such situations are not satisfactory. Is the office a toothless tiger? I hope that the office will play a greater role. You should be given more power. For example, you have no power to mandate organizations to provide certain information. Even if they miss out on providing some information, you do not have the statutory power to penalize them. On legislation and protecting privacy of members of the public, do you have any plan? Do you have any timetable? Have you required departments to conduct internal audits? The aim is to prevent similar accidents from happening again. Next, on accountability culture. Now that the office doesn't have sufficient power, there are negligence factors as well. So in relation to accountability and penalty, what plans do you have up your sleeve? On monitoring of departments, can the Privacy Commissioner do more in order to protect the privacy of members of the public? Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Tik, for supporting our work. On data breaches, they are close to our hearts. There is an upward trend in this connection. We have made recommendations to the government for amending the PDPO to give us more statutory power. We have been working tirelessly to conduct research. There are a few directions in relation to amendment to the PDPO. First of all, a reporting mechanism. At present, when an organization sees data breach incidents, it is not mandatory for the organization to report to us. This is not satisfactory. They should be mandated to report to us. Right now, we need to control the data processor through the data user. So, we need to make legislation to directly regulate data processor instead of managing data processors through the data user. We also want to have more power in relation to financial penalties. We have consulted the 2 committees of the office. We have consulted these 2 standing committees as well as other stakeholders. Recently, there are calls from the trade. If we are to introduce a penalty mechanism or administrative penalty mechanism, will it cause an impact on the business environment? Will it further increase the compliance costs of SMEs? We have noted these concerns. So we'll conduct research and studies with the government. We will see if we need to make further adjustments to PDPO amendments. So while protecting personal privacy, we want to maintain the penalty level at an acceptable panel. So we need more time in this regard. When we have recommendations on the details, we'll come back to the Council to consult members. In relation to departmental monitoring, when government departments or private organizations have data breach incidents, we'll take into account the nature and gravity of the cases. If it is serious, we will publish a report. I believe the relevant policy bureaus and departments will be informed of such incidents as well. For government departments, we'll check whether they have complied with the relevant departmental guidelines. Have they breached the guidelines? If so, we'll inform these departments of this fact. We also take the initiative to conduct compliance checks. We conduct some 400 annual compliance checks. We have the power to review personal data security systems. We send officers to conduct checks on the systems. In relation to accountability, I believe government departments will follow their existing mechanisms to follow up on cases. This is beyond our work portfolio, so we'll give it back to the policy bureaus or the relevant government departments. Thank you. Mr. Tang Fei. I can see the office has done a lot of work. This is worth our recognition. Let's be pragmatic. Out of different personal factors, political leanings, or extreme cases, it is rare for doxing cases to happen on these grounds. Some personal data are leaked online. They may not have to do with doxing cases. Some may have to do with negligence. Some may be cases of cyberbullying instead of malicious spreading of personal data. It may not be a doxing case. In some cases, information of personal accounts are inappropriately used and forwarded. Recently, there are mainland students being scammed. It is said that when they make applications through the intermediaries when they come to Hong Kong, admissions procedures were performed by these intermediaries. Overseas students or local students won't be scammed. Mainland students are scammed. One of the conjectures without sufficient evidence is intermediaries forwarded the information of mainland students to scammers. Hence, these cases, they may not be doxing cases. Some commercial organizations send the personal data of users to different organizations. Well, online scamming is definitely illegal. When we buy electronic products, we sign contracts, say iPad, for the updates of operating systems. When we sign these agreements, we give our consent to commercial organizations to use our data. First of all, is there any legal regulation on such use of data? All commercial organizations are legal, but what about the use and the transfer of one's own personal data to another commercial organization? The office is talking about having more powers, say the penalty powers and so on. I go along with you, but apart from increasing the level of penalty, can you do more to help consumers? Can you scan the common cases in which I have to give my consent to commercial organizations to transfer my personal data? Can you strengthen publicity in this regard? Otherwise, legal professionals won't be able to tell this is actually a trick or a trap for them.
The second issue has to do with a part of the report concerning the examination authority, paragraph 9. The office has made 2 rulings on examination authority. I find nothing wrong with them. I am concerned, rather, about the jurisdiction of the PCPD, because we are talking about the appropriateness of fee being charged. And so how did it come under the jurisdiction of PCPD? And also, how do you define privacy? Because as technologies progress, the definition for privacy is now expanding. Now we are talking about biometric signatures of people that can be really regarded as part of personal privacy, and even cyber footprint of a certain person can now be defined as a part of privacy of a person. And so I'd like to know how can you really take into account the latest definition and latest evolution of definition for personal privacy? Do you have to resort to legislative amendments? Now, thank you, Mr. Tang, for your question. First of all, the consent from supplier of personal data. Now, what exactly is covered by that consent? Actually, the PDPO has very clear delineation as to the boundary of such consent. Now, each organization that is asking for supply of personal data from another party has a very defined, well-defined purpose. And the organization will have to tell the supplier of personal data as to what purpose that is. Now, if that purpose is being exceeded, say the organization at first sets that the supplier of personal data is only for membership registration, but eventually it is being used beyond that, say for other uses, then that would be a violation of the consent. And the organization must first of all get a new consent from the supplier of personal data before they can use it for another purpose. And so this is really defined under the PDPO. And on the mainland, it is also like that. And so whether a case happens in Hong Kong or on the mainland, it will be governed by the PDPO. Now, as for whether our routine inspection can also cover standard contracts or typical contracts, indeed, we can do more in this regard. Every year, we now have taken the initiative to inspect over 400 contracts. And in our inspection, we will look at their consent gathering declaration and whether they have really fulfilled the requirements of the PDPO. Now, as for the examination authority, because the case involved the supplier of the personal data looking at the handling of its own personal data. And our PDPO says that if the supplier of personal data wants to access its own personal data, then the relevant institution has to charge a fee that is reasonable. And that is why this particular case involved a case concerning request for access to personal data and relevant excessive charge. Now, as for definition for personal privacy, I think that was a very good question because right now we are looking at legislative amendments, and indeed this is one aspect that we're looking into because the present legislation says that only a designated or an identified piece of information concerning a person's background is being regarded as part of personal privacy. But right now, other jurisdictions are looking at the possibility of expanding this definition to cover cyber footprint and so on and so forth, i.e. even without the supply of personal data being identified, certain information can also be regarded as parts of the personal privacy of a particular individual. Next, Madam Khan. First of all, I have to declare that I'm the chairman of the relevant committee. Last year, in February, when we made last year's annual report, we already mentioned this particular aspect. I just want to hear what is the response from the administration. The paper says that they have already taken into consideration the possibility that stiffening the fines can add to the burden of SME. So this is something understandable. But last year we made a similar recommendation, and we could actually have phased implementation. Personal privacy actually was first defined in 1999. But because there is no enforced notification, we don't know whether the situation on the ground really is the full part of reality. And also, we have just completed examination of relevant legislation concerning cyber infrastructure. And also, it might involve the handling of personal data as a third party. I just want to know from the administration as to whether a consensus has been formed concerning phased implementation. And the paper also says that 61 of the cases have to do with hackers. And once again, this is something that should raise our alert. And the second issue that I would like to hear from the Commissioner is there has been an increase of 46% of cases concerning gathering of personal information in an illegal manner, numbering 1,154. Now, before the banking ordinance was first of all amended, you must get consent from the Commissioner. So this is unsatisfactory. Actually, if you can amend the banking ordinance, then you don't have to get approval from the Commissioner. But if you fail to amend the banking ordinance, now what is really the meaning of exemption and also the part of information that you refer to? Now, concerning legislative amendment, as the Commissioner has pointed out, the Bureau has all along been in touch with the PCPD. Now, concerning the directions that Madam Khan have pointed out concerning mandatory notification, stiffening the penalty, and definition for personal data, and all of these actually are the directions into which legislative amendments are going into. But as Madam Khan has pointed out, we really have to be mindful as to possible burden on SMEs, especially given the prevailing economic circumstances. If we were to stiffen the penalty, it would add to that pressure. And that is why we are now considering how to implement this in phases, or alternatively, to tweak the amount of fines. Because if you were to refer to overseas examples, for instance, the European Community, they've got several levels of fines. They have the General Data Protection Ordinance, and level 1 fine is 10 million EC, or 2% of their yearly revenue, and level 2 is 20 million, or 4% of their total revenue. Our neighboring region, Singapore, if a personal data protection ordinance is being contravened, a 1 million Singapore dollar fine will be imposed. So we are taking references from all of these developments to see how our legislative amendments should be crystallized. I think they are moving way too slowly because we have already waited for over a year. They claim that they are moving at full speed, but I think they are too slow. So the councillor is really concerned about the timeline. And also, you have legislative for mandatory notification. I'm sure if this has been implemented, then definitely will be more than over 200 cases. And you can have the legislation in place first and then implement it in phases, or stiffening the penalties can wait a little bit. Last year, in February, we already discussed this same issue, and we are still really almost at the same place. Okay, Secretary, would you please go back and think on this, and then come up with a written reply in due course. Commissioner, I thank Madam Khan for her question. Now, concerning the amendment to banking ordinance, the Hong Kong MA has been consulting us all along. And we have given them our professional advice as to how best to fulfill the requirements under PDPO. I just want to point out that, of course, we agree that if each case has to come before us for an exemption, this is completely unsatisfactory, or nor is it practical. And that is why the advice we're giving them is not moving in that direction. I just want to point out that if among banks, they transfer information on their clients, and the purpose is for prevention and detection of crime, this actually comes under the exemption granted by Article 58 of PDPO. And so as long as they can fulfill the condition that the transfer of personal data is for detection and prevention of crime, then it can be exempted. And certain exemptions are already granted under the PDPO, and there is no requirement for further legislative amendments to exempt needed and useful exchange of personal data among banks. Last year, they have released a model concerning protection of personal data under the AI environment. So my question is this. I'd like to know, under this model, what exact improvements have you made? And AI indeed can be used as a tool for preventing breach of personal data. If so, can you confirm that this is really very effective tool for prevention of breach of personal data? And my second question has to do with e-commerce platform such as Uber or food delivery platforms and so on and so forth. And all of these platforms actually collect a large amount of personal data. On the mainland, the operators of the e-service operators are required by law to block off the telephone number, i.e., for the food delivery person, if he has to call up the customer, he cannot really see the telephone number. The telephone number will be blocked off. I'd like to know whether such devices and measures can be adopted in Hong Kong in order to protect personal data.
Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. On the AI model framework, after the issuance of the framework, we have held different seminars as well as talks to introduce the model framework. We have also organized workshops. The purpose is to let the industry share how they apply AI in their business. These events are very popular among SMEs as well as other organizations. They find it practical to compare notes with other organizations on the use of AI. Over 450 groups, professional bodies, organizations, government departments received this model framework. Last November, we appointed the Hong Kong Productivity Council to conduct a study on AI security or AI risks. It looked at how companies use AI to collect personal data. It also assessed public awareness in relation to personal data. We aim to conduct compliance checks in the first quarter of this year. We aim to conduct a compliance check on the use of AI in the industry. It assesses whether companies or the industry is able to use AI in a legal manner in relation to how AI helps companies to guard against personal data breach. It came to our attention that some large-scale organizations use AI to conduct risk assessments. AI is used to identify any loophole in the IT systems, and AI is used to plug these loopholes. In relation to e-commerce platforms, we have been keeping a close watch on the collection of personal data by these e-commerce platforms, especially for food delivery platforms online. They are covered as well. Regarding e-platforms, how they get in touch with customers, how they collect personal data. We'll do more on this front this year. Thank you. Next member, Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chairman. Especially on data breaches, be they private organizations or public organizations, we have seen an upward trend. There is no doubt. We understand the public's concerns. I understand the Commissioner has been doing her bit. The Commissioner can only work according to law. I recognize her work. But more should be done, and we need the administration to help the Commissioner. I go along with Ms. Carmen Can in relation to mandatory reporting and making stiffer penalties, which is what the Commissioner wants. It's really when we can make it happen. I need to emphasize that we need to put in place a mandatory reporting mechanism for inadvertent disclosure of personal data. We need to increase the level of penalty in order to prevent further incidents. In relation to the use of AI, other members mentioned AI application as well. The application of AI will pose challenges to personal data. This is unquestionable. In 2024, you published an AI model framework. In December 2024, the Law Society of Hong Kong asked 442 enterprises, some 70% of them said that using AI in the workplace will bring about significant AI privacy risks. Many companies comply with the model framework. I have to admit that in relation to AI, I took a look at the model framework. But it's just a model framework. Can you do more to help SMEs? For instance, in other countries, there is software to help companies. Software can help them identify any possible breaches of the principle of the PDPO or the ordinance in relation to personal data in their own jurisdictions. In relation to transfer of personal data, there isn't much protection for cross-boundary transfer of personal data. With the development of AI, we can expect more in this regard in the future. How are you going to protect the public? Next, my suggestion. For cases breaching the PDPO, every single case will be reported online. I understand the office conducts surprise checks on some cases. However, in other countries or in other jurisdictions, they are more transparent. They publicize every single case, and I believe this is part of publicity or public education. Will you do something along this line? Commissioner? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Doreen Kong, for your support for our work. In relation to the development of AI, will we consider producing some software? We are considering this possibility. We keep a close watch on other jurisdictions. For regulatory or monitoring sandbox, it is on our mind, and we are preparing for similar projects. We'll see what we can provide to enterprises. The aim is to allow them to better use AI on cross-boundary transfer of personal data. Under the PDPO in Hong Kong, we are, after all, an open economy. If we are to transfer personal data across the boundary, as long as the requirements under the PDPO are met, this is allowed. For example, during the collection of personal data, we need to let the data subject know that the data may be transferred to data processors overseas. In the case that the purpose of the collection of personal data is different, a consent needs to be sought from the data subject, and that is the existing regulation or criteria under the PDPO. If personal data are to be transferred from Hong Kong to other jurisdictions, other relevant requirements need to be met. In relation to the handling of investigations under the existing PDPO, on average, we received some 3,000 complaints, and there are 200 data breach incidents every year. Under the PDPO, we need to take into account different cases before we decide whether we will publish an investigation report. For example, we will have to see how many people are affected Are they affecting the public interest and so on? Some cases may be trivial or minor. They only affect a handful of people in the community. In other cases, some social welfare organizations lost a USB drive or a USB device, or an employee clicked on a phishing hyperlink. In these cases, we may not find it necessary to carry out an official or in-depth investigation. An employee clicks a phishing hyperlink, and probably that is not in line with the company policy. In these cases, we remind the company of reminding the employees to comply with company guidelines or directions. That's how we select suitable cases to publish investigation reports online. We make available these contents of the investigation reports. In some cases, the reports are classified, so we'll have to take into account the nature of different cases before we decide how we will handle the findings on the investigation or whether we will publish an investigation report. What I believe Mr. Kong is concerned about enhancing the level of transparency. So maybe the Commissioner may consider trying your best to publicize the investigation report or results so the society will understand more about this aspect. Mr. Kenneth Fogg. Thank you. My point is similar to Mr. Kong's and Ms. Carmen Can's. In 2024, there were 200-odd reports, 67 from public organizations, a jump of 30% from last year. Technologies are developing in leaps and bounds. With AI, I believe they will be developed even faster. I'm a chairman or president of a smaller scale public organization, and my organization was attacked by a hacker. Fortunately, though, it didn't translate into data breaches. In handling this matter, it came to my attention that different public organizations have different practices in relation to handling data breach incidents. Probably that is their first time, or there's a lack of protocols in relation to how these incidents should be handled. Some may make a report instantly, whereas some may wait for a week before they make a report. Public organizations are quasi-government organizations. Are there any guidelines? Just now, some members mentioned a mandatory reporting mechanism. This may be our next step, but at least we need guidelines. We need clearer guidelines. Some organizations lack experience in handling these matters. We want to plug the loophole in relation to technologies. We need to enhance IT security. We need to enhance both hardware and software, but this is costly. Organizations aren't clear how this should be done either. I'm no expert in this area. Some say that it's better to do so on cloud, whereas some say the opposite. The board of directors of public organizations may not know clearly the way forward. So, is it possible to have tailor-made plans to help public organizations to enhance their level of protection? Thank you. Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. One on guidelines. In handling data breach incidents and the reporting of such incidents, in 2023, we issued a set of guidelines. In 2022, we also issued a guideline. We helped organizations to take 5 steps in handling these matters. We teach these organizations to handle data breach incidents. First of all, they have to understand the nature of the breach incidents, and then they will have to take mitigation measures. We have listed all these measures. On security measures, we let organizations know in relation to their IT systems what basic security measures they will have to take in order to protect data security. For instance, they will have to take stock of the loopholes of their systems so that they will have to decide whether they need to undertake any assessments of their systems. We have covered all these in our guidelines. After the issuance of these guidelines, the office has been organizing workshops, seminars to share with the public information in this regard. We also share our experience in this regard. Some are less costly. For example, the activation of the double verification system, the installation of firewall systems. We introduce such information to the trade. In relation to public organizations, on the website of the Digital Policy Office DPO, there is relevant information provided to public organizations as well as government departments. We work closely with the DPO. We have regard to the guidelines and check government practice against these guidelines. Last year, we received reports of 203 data breaches. Some 35% came from public organizations. 65% to 70% came from private organizations. It is not the case that many of these cases came from public organizations, but whenever there are such cases in the public organizations, there are media reports. Thank you.
Final member to speak on this issue, Madam Le. In May 2019, at LegCo, I raised a motion on how best to protect personal data and also to make the PDPO and the PCPD more effective. I'm very happy to see that there has been significant improvement. In the past, the PCPD was a toothless terror, but now some powers have been given to the office, and also it can really execute certain penalties. I don't know whether you have noticed that 61 countries last week co-signed a international convention providing a moral framework for use of AI to make the use of AI more sustainable. Unfortunately, UK and USA refused to sign the international convention. Now, for protection of personal data, EC is really moving ahead of the rest of the world. And in Hong Kong, we have several major data breaches by private companies, and the government also has been responsible for leak of 3 million odd voters' data. And so both public and private organizations have been involved in major data breaches. Now the international communities can see that there is need for certain international consensus, and China has also signed on the international convention. In February and March last year, we had a university summit on this particular issue. I think the bottom line is how can the use of AI by researchers and scientists can be done in such a manner that moral principles and moral compasses would not be breached. And over 50 organizations have already signed off on the agreement. And so we really need such moral boundaries. Otherwise, the use of AI would become in total chaos. You can see that both UK and USA have refused to sign off on the international convention, saying that signing on the international convention is not in the country's interest. Now, For the cyber world, now it seems that unless you move forward, you're going to be pushed back. Now that international convention is already in place, do you believe that such positive education really can be helpful in deterring potential offenders of data breaches? I'd like to thank Madam Leung for her support for our work. Now, for positive education in 2021, we issued moral guidelines for use of AI, and ever since then, we have been putting together workshops as well as international symposiums. Let me interject here. Is it possible for you to also bring in animation so that you can really make inroads on the cyber world? Indeed, this is a very good idea. Indeed, we can do more in this regard. Especially last year, we have introduced the school partnership scheme in order to train up leaders and also promoters of safe use of AI. And also we have put together workshops and international symposiums as well as visits to Microsoft headquarters in Hong Kong. And over 100 students actually have participated in the program. And at the international level, we fully appreciate what Madam Leung said, and we thank her for her recommendation. Starting from October last year, we have been commissioned to become a co-chairman of a subgroup for protection of personal data in the AI environment, which is a global body. And that is why, as co-chairman, we can participate in high-level discussion and dialogue at the international level over the strategies to combat improper use of AI that would result in personal data breaches. And last year, in conjunction with 50 other jurisdictions, we have signed off on a joint declaration on how best to combat the leak of personal data and the misuse of personal data in the cyber world. Okay, on that note, we thank the administration for answering members' concerns as well as questions. And now we move on to the next item. Report from the EOC. So, the Secretary, would you please get the officials to come in and also representatives of the EOC to come in? So, the item is on the work of Equal Opportunities Commission in 2024 and its efforts on the promotion of support to diverse communities for equal opportunities. Please indicate that you wish to speak if you really have questions or comments to throw to the floor. We have to finish by 4:30. And 5 members have indicated that they would like to speak. And if you have any desire to speak, you have to make your indication now. Yeah, you may start now, Chairman. Chairman, members of the committee, our work completed in 2024 as well as our work plan for 2025 and 2026 has been submitted to you in the form of a document. I'm going to highlight salient points. Concerning enforcement of law in 2024, we have handled 9975 inquiries and 1,100 odd or 1,400 odd complaints, which have shown an increase in both cases. And 37% of the cases have to do with sexual discrimination ordinance, and accounting for 58% and 20%. And concerning the complaints that we have handled, 70% have to do with employment matters. As for cases that have been designated as complaints, we are going to do mediation. And we have completed 216 cases of mediation. 244 of them have been successful. And we have managed to secure compensation to the tune of $6.01 million. Now, for successful cases, the complainants can get legal aid from EOC, and we have received 15 such cases. 9 of them have been successful. And 2 employment cases that have to do with harassment. We have instigated litigation in order to seek court judgment, and we hope that through these cases and rulings, we can raise awareness of the public and employers, employees in particular, concerning harassment at job places. Now, as for support for carers, we have put together 385 training programs that have to do with family position discrimination ordinance. And we have explained to members of the public as to the protection that can be afforded to people that are in the role of carers. And also, we have put together seminars for the benefit of public and private non-profiting organizations and their human resources departments to educate them as to what are the measures that are family-friendly. And also, we have provided support for carers, for mentally ill persons, as well as family-friendly employment measures. And last year, we have also put together a set of guidelines concerning dementia, and in order to support carers for sufferers of dementia. And this year, we will initiate research on how to support carers for mentally ill persons and what are the difficulties that they face and what should be the improvements that could benefit them. As for encouraging disabled people to participate in community, we have been very actively encouraging our city to become more accessible for disabled people. And in 2024, we have come up with an award scheme for good performances in providing accessibility for disabled people, so that we can create role models in our community for other institutions to follow, so as to increase accessibility in our community for disabled people. And towards the end of this year, we are going to come up with part 2 of the award scheme in order to make accessibility services as well as measures and devices the mainland features. And also, we'll do research on online platforms to see how they are accessible by disabled people, such as apps and other online platforms, so that we can provide digital accessibility for disabled people. In another regard, we have come up with various guidelines in order to raise awareness of members of the public as well as employers concerning various forms of disabilities, so that we can encourage disabled people to become more involved in community. And for instance, last year we have come up with use of seeing eye dogs guidelines, and in June we have come up with a guidelines for media to follow when it comes to handling mentally ill patients' cases, so that they would not attach stigma to people that are recovering from mental illness or suffering from mental illness. And in September, we have also come up with guidelines for employers of carers that are taking care of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and also to provide awareness for employers that are employing carers to look after family members of dementia patients. And also, we have put together seminars in order to educate members of the public as to how to prevent discrimination and stigmatizing people with mental conditions. Now, as for equal opportunities work for ethnic minorities, 2024 marked the 15th anniversary of the advent of prevention of discrimination on the basis of ethnic grounds. And so we are doing a lot of things in order to encourage the inclusion of ethnic minorities in the community so as to mitigate the difficulties in getting jobs and also getting services.
We have racially friendly campus recognition scheme, racial diversity and inclusion charter for employers, and racial diversity and inclusion recruitment fair last October. Together with an organization, we held racial diversity and inclusion recruitment fair. We encourage employers to look for more talents from ethnic minorities. In 2025, we'll launch more award schemes to encourage teachers and employers to promote social or racial inclusion. We will also work with other stakeholders to explore helping non-Chinese speaking students to learn Chinese. We will continue with a study to help ethnic minorities to access public services through digital channels. Last year, we put in place a teaching resource that is Harmony in the Universe, online educational modules for primary school students. We want to enhance their compassion. We have also organized the Equal Opportunity Cup inter-school debate competition and Equal Opportunity Youth Ambassador scheme. At the same time, we are working on the third scheme of the Equal Opportunity Youth Ambassador scheme. We want to let students know the different needs of different groups in the community so that we can promote the messages of equal opportunities among peers. Combating on sexual harassment has always been our goal. We have a unit, ASXU, Anti-Sexual Harassment Unit. It is responsible for handling sexual harassment matters reported by citizens. We also take a multi-pronged approach, say training, publicity, and education to combat sexual harassment. We organize training, seminars, workshops, and so on to heighten public awareness in relation to anti-sexual harassment. This year, we will launch the Anti-Sexual Harassment Short Video Competition. We encourage the public to produce video clips to explain the importance of taking zero-tolerance approach against sexual harassment. We'll continue to work with different stakeholders to eliminate discrimination. So we will instill the concept of social harmony and social inclusion, discrimination-free into the minds of young people. That is how we can help Hong Kong develop. That concludes my introduction. Thank you. We welcome members' questions. 6 members have pressed the button to request to speak. The lineup is Dr. Teck Chi Yuen, Ms. Carmen Kan, Dr. So Chang Wing, Mr. Yim Kong, Ms. Doreen Kong, and Mr. Holden Chow. We have around 26 minutes before this meeting ends. 3 minutes each, questions and answers included. Please manage your time well and try your best to ask your questions within 2 minutes. Dr. Teck Chi Yuen. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to talk about universal design. Hong Kong is a modern society. We have barrier-free facilities, say escalators in MTR stations. However, when it comes to universal design, none of the facilities in Hong Kong meets the criteria. There are 7 criteria, say flexibility, fairness, instinctiveness, diversity, and so on. These are the 7 international elements. For distinctiveness, we need to make it easy for the physically challenged to move around. If they have to take a detour in order to use the facilities, then it doesn't meet the requirement of one of the international elements. Hong Kong is a highly modern society. We have the conditions to put in place more universal designs, but departments aren't proactive enough, so we pin our hopes on EOC. Please help women, help the elderly, help minority to strive for improvements. Is there any room for legislation? Do you have an impactful guideline? Do you have sufficient monitoring? For Town Planning Board, land development doesn't take into account universal designs either. Only some places in Hong Kong have universal design, but that's not enough. With universal design, we can improve the employment opportunities of the physically challenged. We need to promote universal design through legislation. On employment for the disabled, the ratio stands at 1.4%. That is the percentage for disability for the disabled employment rate. Can you spur the government to work harder to increase the percentage from 1.4% to 2%? The government needs to take the initiative to do so. Chair Lady, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tick. Barrier-free facilities are not helpful enough in building Hong Kong into a universal design city. We didn't give up on other measures. The Disability Discrimination Ordinance offers protection to the disabled. On employment, moving around, the disabled are protected from being discriminated against on the grounds of their disability. In the past year, among the complaints we have received, over half of the complaints were filed based on the Disability Discrimination Ordinance. Law enforcement work is important, but why do we have to rely on universal designs? I understand different government organizations have other methods as well, but universal designs promote barrier-free facilities and mobilize the entire community to work together. But apart from the stick approach, we also need to take the carrot approach, so to speak. We need to encourage different sectors of society to do better in this regard. We proactively encourage public and private organizations to provide a barrier-free environment for the disabled. Please go ahead. In relation to employment, government and NGOs are also working on employment for the disabled. We have been supporting different NGOs to help the disabled to integrate into the workforce. But if we are to require the government to engage 2% of the civil service, I believe there is still a large room for discussion. Well, I hope the EOC will monitor the government and encourage the government. Ms. Carmen Can, I have one suggestion and two questions. Just now we've heard from the EOC the 2024 report. In the PowerPoint presentation or the report on the EOC, I failed to see any figures, say those in the past 3 years, those in 2022 to 23. That's exactly how we can gauge the effectiveness and the efficiency of your work. I hope we can be given figures in 2022 to 23. That's how we can take stock of the situation. There are 4 anti-discrimination ordinances, and we can see that more complaints are from employment. There were a total of 1,004 cases. 1,004 cases out of 1,385, that is a total of 72%. So, do you need to work more on the employment front? The other area is for talents from the mainland and from overseas. The EOC said that they would undertake research and NGOs and academic organizations are invited to provide suggestions on the 4 anti-discrimination ordinances. Applications haven't yet been closed. Can the chair lady tell us more about it? Thank you. We can indeed provide figures in 2022 to 23. Overall, there isn't any significant change in the trend. Most of the complaints or cases are in the employment context. In accordance with the Disability Discrimination Ordinance, more cases are reported as a result of the DDO, Disability Discrimination Ordinance. For incoming talents from overseas, the EOC is undertaking a study We want to see the challenges these incoming talents face. We also want to know whether they will stay in Hong Kong. That's how we can identify the discrimination phenomenon in Hong Kong. In relation to the subsidy research scheme, which will expire on the 25th of February, we will set aside a small amount of subvention for NGOs or academic organizations to conduct research on anti-discrimination ordinances. The purpose of the scheme is to mobilize the community to conduct studies on discrimination matters. We don't want the EOC to be the only organization that undertakes such research. We want different quarters of society to take part as well. In relation to incoming talents research, it is undertaken by the EOC. However, for the scheme that I mentioned, which will expire on the 25th of February, we welcome scholars and NGOs to take part in this scheme. The cost is some $50,000. Well, I mean, if the organization is successful, the subvention granted will be $50,000. We encourage society to look into discrimination matters or equal opportunities matters. You cover talents from overseas and from the mainland as well, is that correct? Yes, indeed, we cover all incoming talents coming to Hong Kong. We want to know what challenges they face and whether they have been discriminated against. Next, Dr. So Chang-Wing. Thank you, Chairman. In your report, you mentioned in 2024, the EOC handled more cases as compared with 2023. All cases received in 2024 were handled. There wasn't any backlog. This is commendable. But I'd like to speak on the report of the EOC. EOC received a total of 1,075 complaints in 2024, more than the number of cases received in 2023. It was decided no investigation was performed for 52 cases, and 866 cases investigation was discontinued, accounting for 82% of all cases. I'd like to know what yardstick you adopt. What is the reason behind the discontinuation of the investigation? For these 918 complaints, how many were unreasonable reports? Are there cases in which the aggrieved person is afraid of being attacked as a result, or on the grounds of revenge? The chair lady mentioned there was a recruitment. I'd like to know the effect of the job fair or the recruitment exercise. Probably, I'd like to know the figures. How many were shortlisted? How many were engaged? Thank you.
Let me add further here to paragraph 6 of the paper we gave you. In 2024, we have received complaints numbering 1075. But we actually handled 430. This is because 330 cases had been carried over from previously, and that's why we cleared them only in 2024. And that is why the number of complaints we received actually was smaller than the actual number of complaints that we handled, because some of the complaints that we handled were from previous year. And as for 52 of the cases that we have not followed up on, the reasons were as follows. We discovered that the complaints involved grounds that were not really regulated by the ordinance, or the complainants have changed their mind, not wishing to pursue the case further, or the case actually was reported to us as complaint only 12 months after it had happened. And so we exercised discretion not to pursue those cases. And some other grounds involved unsubstantiated evidence being submitted. And so these were the grounds for stopping investigation on 52 cases. As for stopping investigation on 866 cases, we have already initiated investigation into these cases, but after investigation, 23rd of them did not constitute offense against the law. And also 265 cases involve complainants not wishing to pursue cases further, and 17 of the cases were in exceedance of the 12-month period, and 561 cases have not been substantiated, and that's why we stopped investigation into these cases. And so these are the grounds for us not to follow the investigation through to the end for these cases. As for ethnic diversity recruitment drive, many of the employers that have come to the drive actually were signatories of the Charter of Ethnic Diversity in Employment, and they have also participated in interviews, and they have opened a dialogue with potential employees. As for the success rate, the actual success rate, we have not been submitted with relevant numbers because some of such information has been considered sensitive by the relevant employers, and that's why we did not follow up on that. We do appreciate that after the recruitment drive, further subsequent interviews have been conducted or examinations have been conducted for the benefit of potential employees. I would like to follow up on Mr. So's question. The report says that of the 1,000 odd cases of complaints that you have received, you have taken the initiative to investigate only 28 of them. I'd like to know how come the number was so small? Was it because of insufficient manpower resources? Is it possible for you to increase the number of cases that you take initiative in doing investigation on? And also, with the introduction of AI, is it possible for you to mitigate your manpower shortage? So that you can make use of AI to really keep yourself in touch with the potential clients and people that in need of help so as to reduce the number of complaints. Very often, we do encourage members of the public to, when they're in face of discrimination, come forth to make a complaint to us. And as for taking initiative in doing investigation, that happens when from media or from other reports we appreciate that there are certain cases of potential discrimination or that people actually have already suffered from discrimination, but they are reluctant to come forth with a complaint. Let me give you an example. A passerby may say that for a particular restaurant, they have failed to provide a certain slope or a pathway with gradient to facilitate disabled people, and they make a report to us. And there is an advertisement saying that the employer is looking for female employees only. And when we come across such cases, we could come to the conclusion that these cases actually could be cases of potential discrimination. And we would take initiative in writing letters to them, alerting them to the possibility of contravening discrimination ordinance. So these cases happen when we, through media, come across such cases, or other parties have brought such cases to our attention. Relevant suppliers of such products or the shop operators usually are cooperative, and they usually are in danger of breaking the law on an inadvertent basis, not deliberately. And paragraph 7 of the paper also says that for completed cases, our target is 75% to be completed within 6 months. However, in 2024, actually, we have exceeded that target. 90% of the cases have been completed within 89 days. And so manpower-wise, we are not suffering from shortage. We still have 8 minutes. Mr. or Madam Doreen Kong and then Mr. Hon Chow, both of you will ask questions first, and then we'll ask EOC to give a consolidated reply, and then finally leaving me 1 minute to wrap this case up. And indeed, we are talking about reforms. Actually, EOC is also in need of reform. For EOC, I do understand your work. Your work has been steady and even over the years, but it is undeniable that certain very Asian issues are very stubborn. For instance, accessibility. This has not been resolved over the years, and so we have to ask ourselves whether there is a need for us to reform EOC. EOC indeed is suffering from limited powers. I do sympathize with you because you only have 4 ordinances, and 3 of them have been enacted in 96-97, and so they are over 30 years old, and you are only responsible for enforcing the law or executing the law. And how can this issue be resolved? Relying on EOC is not enough because you also need social welfare authorities and also a youth authority to help you. And so your limited powers really constrain you. And our society is evolving all the time, and members of the public have become more and more demanding. And so we have to be politically aware as to how to find a new path so that we can really satisfy the equal opportunities principles and to protect our community. Now, I understand that you have done a research on carers for mentally ill persons. I'd like to know how come it only covers mentally ill patients, because if you only target one particular quarter of community, I don't think you are providing equal opportunities. Now, what about the carers for elderly people? They are also in need of your support and help. Mr. Hon Chow, I'm going to be quick. In Annex 1 of the paper, we see that of the 4 relevant ordinances, the disability discrimination ordinance in employment or non-employment background actually have attracted the largest number of complaints. Now, I would like to know whether you have done any studies as to how come this is the case. Now, what were the grounds for such complaints? Is it mainly because of the failure to provide infrastructure or facilities? so that they encounter difficulties in workplaces. I would really like to know because we really want to target exactly where the issue is. Thank you. We do agree that our Commission really needs to continue to reinvent itself. And so we are really acutely aware that we need to really keep ourselves abreast of the latest development. The reason why we targeted only mentally ill patients first. Now, actually many guidelines have been issued, and we have to set our priorities. There are various demands from various quarters, and every year we really have to sort out our priorities and deal with urgent issues first. And mentally ill patients and their carers are, in our opinion, the urgent issue, and that's why we targeted them first. Now, as for discrimination ordinance, indeed, largest number of complaints have surfaced under this ordinance, and in most of the cases, these disabled people have been laid off or ill-treated because of their disabilities or because of their sickness. And two of the litigation cases actually have to do with such subject. And one of the litigation cases actually has already been completed. And the disabled person in question was working for a piano teaching company, but his or her disability resulted in her being laid off. And so the case was taken to litigation, and the disabled person won the case. And indeed, the disability discrimination ordinance attracted the largest number of complaint cases, mostly because disabled people have encountered difficulties or mistreated in workplaces. Madam Kong. Let me chime in here. So Madam Kwong was mainly concerned about whether other ordinances, apart from the 4 discrimination-related ordinances, can provide support and further assistance. Actually, apart from the 4 discrimination ordinances, other ordinances, such as building ordinance, have been continuously updated by the Buildings Department to meet anti-discrimination requirements. For instance, accessibility and design of buildings. And every few years, such provisions will be updated. But the fact remains that certain guidelines and certain legislation have been enacted only recently, and without any retrospective powers, it's difficult for us to cover buildings or services or places that have been in place way before the ordinances were enacted. Right, we have to wrap things up now. Item 5 on the agenda, AOB. No items under AOB. Meeting adjourned.